Making a game can take months, sometimes even years. But what if I told you you can actually make a game in just 2 weeks? Or even just 3 days?
No way.
And you know what, actually? I went ahead and I made 7 games in 1 year. Hi everyone, I am Lance and I am a university student and I work part-time. I also try and work out regularly. This year I went ahead and I somehow managed to ship 7 games while working part-time and while training for a marathon. Here is a quick rundown of those 7 games that I made this year. Look, there are a few ways that you could go about making a bunch of games. Now, for me though, I just went ahead and stuck with 2 methods. 1 being game jams and 2 university projects. In the beginning of the year, I decided it would probably be a good idea to do a game jam as a warm-up before my second year of uni starts. This way I could go into the year feeling a lot more confident in my abilities. One morning I was checking my university Discord and I noticed Hero Dev looking for people to start a team for the upcoming Pirate Software game jam. So I reached out, and fortunately for me, he didn't really mind what kind of skill level people were. I tagged along and I helped where I could. We decided to make a wave-based survival game where you play as a magic flail. The goal was simple: survive through all the waves. My role was primarily doing the spawn system of the enemies and then the sourcing and the implementation of the audio. This was my first ever game jam experience and I am so glad that it was a good experience because I have heard many horror stories where people would go and join as a team for a game jam and let's just say they weren't a team for very long. Right after the game jam, it was already time to start my second year of university. It felt so quick, but we were already flung into making 2 games simultaneously. 1 game for my major, game design, and then another game for game development. For our major, we could make any game we wanted, it was all up to us. And since I spent most of my end of the holiday playing Vampire Survivors, I went ahead and I decided to make a survivor-like game called Geomania. In this game, I did absolutely everything myself except for the audio. Development for this game was pretty smooth, but I must say I did have one major issue, and that was time. For my initial idea, I had completely run out of time. So I had to abandon the art style and I went for simple shapes instead. But like I said, while I was working on this game, I was also working on the game for game development as well. And this game had to be a card game. The rules were simple. All you had to do was make sure that the player can play a valid hand, and then something else needs to happen afterwards. We also needed to implement a special rule from a list. So I made a simple card game where you play traditional poker hands in order to hack firewalls to steal money. I must say though, the development process of this game was smooth sailing. I think that mostly had to do with the fact that we did so much planning before we had even started with any of the scripts. And just like that, 6 months had passed and I had 3 games under my belt already. Before we continue, I'd really like to ask if you can please go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. I'd really like to hit 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I am so close. Thank you. Alright, back to the video. So after a few weeks of much needed rest, it was time to get back to university to start the second semester. And let me just say, it was during this semester that reality really checked me hard. This time we'd make our games as a group. For game design, I was put in a group with 3 others and we had decided to make the game Save Hansel, which in all honesty was a pretty huge undertaking. We already knew in the beginning that it was going to be a lot of work. But there was another problem. We had to take part in 2 game jams in the semester. So not only were we going to make Save Hansel, we were also going to make a game for game development, and on top of that, another 2 game jams. Where were we going to find the time? But apparently because we absolutely just hate sleep, we decided we'd take part in both game jams within the first 2 weeks of the semester. First, a 3-day game jam, the Kenny Game Jam. We decided that we would use that Kenny Game Jam as a learning opportunity just to focus on what our roles were going to be for Save Hansel. But after that, we still had to take part in another game jam. So we grouped up with another 2 people that we knew for the GMTK 4-day game jam. The theme for this game jam was loop, which could have been interpreted in many different ways. And to be honest, a couple of us were kind of just stuck on the idea of donuts. But in the end, we decided on a train type game where you transport resources from different planets to the other. But yeah, in just 4 days, we made something that I felt was pretty damn promising. I think if we had spent another 2 weeks on the game, it could have been pretty cool. I must say, these 2 game jams in particular taught me a lot about rapid prototyping and why they can be so important. I think it can definitely save a studio a lot of time finding out very early if a game is actually viable or not. Because let's be real, if it sucks during the prototype phase, it's probably going to suck later on too, even if it looks pretty. But awesome. All right, cool. Once we had those 2 game jams out of the way, it was finally time to get to work on Save Hansel. My role in the team was the programmer, so I spent most of my time writing endless lines of code, which I enjoyed far more than fixing the bugs that those lines created. But anyway, all that while still training for my first ever marathon and working part-time. It was very stressful at times though, because sometimes we just didn't have the time to get things tested and debugged and ironed out before any deliverables. And there were times where I literally just couldn't wrap my head around certain things. Sometimes I was spending all day writing code and then I would still go and run 15 kilometers. I would get into bed and my legs hurt, my head hurts, and I'm still dreaming in C#. What the hell? We fell into quite the big trap, the main trap, scope creep. So we ended up having to cut a lot of things out of the game that we had intended to add. It was painful, and you know what? It taught me a very valuable lesson. A finished, polished game is far more valuable than an unfinished dream game. Next time, I definitely need to do a better job at planning out the scope so that I can avoid this in the future. Next year, I'm going to focus on making a smaller game that can be much more scalable with a better and more enjoyable replayable loop, I think. I've already got some ideas, so I'm quite excited, so just go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out. And then while working on Save Hansel for game design, we were also making a game for game development. Our entire class was put together as a group. We were only 7 though, so not that big of a group. As this 7-person team, well 8 if you include the lecturer, because he did help out a lot, we were tasked with making a restaurant simulator. We each had our own specific role. Mine was the waiting staff system. So I had quite a big responsibility as my system was basically the link between all of the other systems. In the first half of the semester, we would focus on making our systems in isolation. And then in the second half of the semester, we had to work together and communicate in order to bring everything together. For me, this project taught me a lot about communicating with team members, refactoring code, and systems design, which I really enjoyed. In the end, we had some fun testing it all out, and we had a good few laughs. And there we go, just like that, 7 games in 1 year. I had a really good time this year, although very stressful at times, but honestly, that just helped me learn how to have much better time management skills. Anyway guys, that is all. If you are still watching at this point in time of the video, you are an absolute legend. Thank you so much. Please go ahead and subscribe if you have not done that already. I really hope that you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, and I hope to see you in the next video. Cheers.